Once more, please give rise to bodhicitta, the thought, I will establish all mother beings, limitless in number as the vast reaches of space, at the level of perfect all-knowing enlightenment. To that end, I will listen to this profound Dharma and I will put it into practice accordingly. Together with the motivation of bodhicitta, please give rise to the vast skillful means, the outlook of the Vidyadharas, namely the pure perception that acknowledges that all phenomena are primordially the nature of the five perfections. The teaching we are looking at today is A Treasury of Gems, a commentary by annotation of the Great Master Padmasambhava's Pith Instruction, A Garland of Views. So let's refresh our memory of the outline, the structure of the text. So the commentary reads, it begins by saying, here is an explanation of the Pith Instruction, A Garland of Views, a treatise indisputably ascribed to the Great Master Padmasambhava. It comprises 3 sections, an introduction, the main body of the text, and a conclusion. The first of these, the introduction, is divided into an explanation of the title and an expression of veneration. So these parts we have already covered. We're now looking at the main body of the text. The main body of the text is divided into explanations of the different views and the different kinds of yogic disciplines, or we could say conducts. So these 2 main divisions. The first of these explanations is divided into non-Buddhist and Buddhist views. These 2, each of which consists of a brief outline and a detailed explanation. We have covered the explanation of non-Buddhist views, and we're now looking at Buddhist views. The explanation of Buddhist views is comprised of an explanation of the vehicle of characteristics, and secondly, an explanation of the diamond vehicle, or the Vajra vehicle of secret mantra. We're currently looking at the explanation of the vehicle of characteristics. And this explanation of the vehicle of characteristics contains, first of all, a brief introduction and then a detailed explanation. We've covered the brief introduction. We're now looking at the detailed explanation, which itself contains an explanation of the listener vehicle, an explanation of the solitary realizer vehicle, and an explanation of the bodhisattva vehicle. We've covered the first, the explanation of the listener vehicle, and we're currently looking at the explanation of the solitary realizer vehicle. So let's continue where we left off yesterday. By such means, these beings realize the illusion-like ultimate nature of phenomena, the profound meaning. Although they remain in an inexpressible concentration, where speech is completely halted, they still entertain the notion it is inexpressible, because they have not eliminated the concept of the apprehending subject. So the solitary realizers, the Pratyeka Buddhas, by such means, by practicing in the ways previously explained, they realize the illusion-like ultimate nature of phenomena, the profound meaning. They have realized that all phenomena lack reality, they're just like illusions. Their realization matches the Shravakas, the listeners. Like the listeners, they have realized the no-self of the person. In addition, they've realized the no-self, the emptiness or lack of reality of coarse phenomena. When we talk about phenomena, we can talk about the apprehended aspect and the apprehending aspect. Or we could say the apprehended object and apprehending subject. So the solitary realizers have realized to some degree the emptiness of the apprehended object, but they haven't realized the emptiness of the apprehending subject. So their realization exceeds that of the listeners. It exceeds that of the listeners because they realize to some extent the emptiness of the apprehending object. So this refers then to the emptiness of coarse form. We spoke about different types of form earlier on during the session yesterday. So actually, if we go into this in detail, there's a lot of debate and a lot of subtle distinctions to be made. When we say the solitary realizers have realized the emptiness or the no-self of the apprehended object of phenomena, we're not saying they've realized that to the same profound extent as, say, the Madhyamaka practitioners. But they have realized it to some extent. And actually this is a topic of much debate and discussion amongst the earlier and later scholars, the degree to which the solitary realizers have realized the no-self of phenomena in its apprehended or apprehending aspect. We won't go into those details, that would just take up all of our time. But anyway, it is a topic of much debate. And in any case, to sum up, the solitary realizers have realized, in addition to the no person of self, they've realized an aspect of the no. In addition to realizing the no self of the person, they have realized an aspect of the no self of phenomena, and that's why their realization is described as the realization of 1.5 types of no self. So the no self of the person, and then a half or part of the no self of phenomena. In any case, there's no need for us to go into these details about the subtleties and the specifics of the various tenet systems. It's not the this is not the situation for that kind of discussion. This text we're looking at is a pith instruction, not it's not a philosophical text laying out the details of the various tenet systems. So we'll follow the approach of the pith instruction. And in short, we can say that what have the Pratyeka Buddhas, the solitary realized? Well, they realized slightly more than the listeners, than the Shravakas. The Shravakas realize that there is no self, there is no person, no individual self present within the aggregates. So they realize the no self of the person, but they do not yet realize the no self of the aggregates themselves. The solitary realizers go further than this. So like the listeners, they realize that yes, there is no self, there is no person in the aggregates, but they also realize to some extent that the aggregates themselves lack reality. So they realize the no self of person, and in addition they realize to some extent the no self of phenomena, the apprehended aspect of phenomena. So they realize the no self of form, the form aggregate. But there are many other phenomena aside from the form aggregate, right? There is the aggregate of sensation, of formation, of perception, of consciousness, and so on. And the solitary realizers have not yet realized the emptiness or no self of these aggregates. So we can put it like this: the solitary realizers have realized that from among the 5 aggregates, the form aggregate lacks reality. The form aggregate does not truly exist. However, they have not yet realized the emptiness or the lack of reality of the remaining 4 aggregates of sensation and so on. This realization then of the solitary realizers is described as the realization of 1.5 types of no-self. And thus the text reads, although they remain in an inexpressible concentration where speech is completely halted, they still entertain the notion it is inexpressible because they have not eliminated the concept of an apprehending subject. So they remain in an inexpressible concentration, we could say a state beyond constructs, beyond conceptual elaboration. But they still entertain the notion it's inexpressible. So one note about Dharma terminology here. For those, when one is new to study and not yet familiar with the scriptures, then you inevitably interpret these various terms as meaning the same thing in every context. So when you hear the word emptiness or beyond elaboration, then you think that you might well think that that's referring to the emptiness taught at the level of the great perfection, that level of perfect, profound emptiness. But that is not necessarily the case. These words, terms like emptiness and so on, can be used in different contexts, different levels, to connote different meanings. So this is very important to understand. So a beginner, someone quite new to the study of the scriptures, when they hear words like emptiness, beyond elaborations, just like I've said. They might presume that the emptiness spoken of at the level of the listeners is the same as the emptiness spoken of at the level of the great perfection. Well, that's not the case. So one should be aware of this. Likewise, we have the term inexpressible that's used here. So someone who's kind of new to scriptural study may well think, what is meant by inexpressible here is the same thing that's meant by the inexpressible in the context of the middle way, the Madhyamaka. But that's not the case. Often we find the same words used in different contexts with slightly different meanings. So this is important to keep in mind. So the word inexpressible, say in this context, has one meaning, but then this same word inexpressible might be used at a higher level with a different meaning, a slightly different meaning, a more profound, deeper meaning. So this is often summed up with the phrase, similar word but superior meaning. So you can find the very same words used in different contexts, but at higher levels of teaching, those very same words will have a vaster meaning, they'll hold a superior meaning. So the understanding of the inexpressible at the level of solitary realizers is quite different from the inexpressible at the level of the Chittamatra, the mind only. And likewise, the understanding of let's say the inexpressible state realized by the Chittamachins is quite different from the inexpressible state realized by the Madhyamakas, and so on and so forth. So these solitary realizers, they remain in an inexpressible concentration, having realized, let's say, 1.5 types of no-self, but they still entertain the notion it is inexpressible. So they still have this concept, they still have a concept of the inexpressible. So their meditative equipoise still involves concept, because they have not eliminated the concept of an apprehending subject. So when one reaches the level of the Madhyamakas, well, then within meditative equipoise, there is not even the notion, this is the inexpressible. So because they have realized the no-self of the apprehending object, the apprehended aspect of phenomena, they rest in this state of emptiness, a state of concentration in inexpressible emptiness. And yet, because they have not yet eliminated the concept of an apprehending subject, the apprehending aspect of phenomena, then within equipoise they still have notions of, conceptual notion of, this is the inexpressible, because they have not yet eliminated and realized the no-self of the apprehending subject. Dependent arising is a path common to all Buddhist vehicles. So dependent arising is something common to all Buddhist vehicles, the vehicle of the listeners, the vehicle of solitary realizers, and the vehicle of bodhisattvas. However, there are differences in the profundity of dependent arising. There are differences in the depth to which dependent arising is understood on these various paths. So the degree to which dependent arising is understood by the listeners on their path, that's one thing. But then on the path of the solitary realizers, dependent arising is realized to a greater degree, in a more profound way. And so on and so forth as we go through as we ascend through the vehicles. So the mind-only followers, the Chittamachins, realize dependent arising even more deeply, more completely, we could say, than the solitary realizers. And then the Madhyamaka followers realize even more deeply than the Chittamachins, and so on. So dependent arising is a path common to all Buddhist vehicles, yes, but nevertheless there are degrees in the profundity of the realization of dependent arising on the various paths. In the case of the listeners, their strong adherence to the characteristics of cause and result dispels the non-Buddhist wrong understanding of causation. So in the case of the listeners, the Shravakas, they strongly adhere, they strongly believe in the characteristics of cause and result. So they believe in, they perceive the cause and result, namely the four truths, which have a relationship of cause and result, to be truly established in some way. They strongly adhere to the fact that if one abandons the cause, the origin of suffering, and suffering itself, then one will attain the result, the state of cessation. And in order to attain the result, cessation, one must rely on the path. So the Four Noble Truths have this relationship of cause and result, right? And the listeners, they believe very much that these Four Noble Truths and their nature as cause and result is something established. This understanding, this adherence of theirs, dispels and discards, undoes the non-Buddhist wrong understanding of causation. So compared to the views of non-Buddhists, the view and approach of the listeners is superior. Because the non-Buddhists have a mistaken understanding of causation, right? In the case of non-Buddhist nihilists, well, they don't believe in causation at all. They say there are no past and future lives, and well, that is incorrect. Then we have the non-Buddhist eternalists, and they believe that the cause of everything is their omnipotent creator, Mahadev, or another almighty God. But that is incorrect, right? They mistakenly believe that an almighty God is the cause and creator of everything, but that's not the case. Phenomena come about due to cause and condition, not as the products of some almighty God. And so the view of the listeners dispels the non-Buddhist wrong understanding of causation, the wrong understanding that misidentifies the cause of things, or that that misidentifies the cause of things. The solitary realizers understand dependent arising on a deeper level, realizing that there is no intrinsic essence related to cause and result existing as an apprehended object. So the understanding of the solitary realizers goes deeper than that of the listeners, for they understand that there is no intrinsic essence, there's no established nature of cause and result existing as an apprehended object. So from the perspective of the apprehended aspect of phenomena, cause and result have no true existence, no intrinsic essence. Now moving on to the understanding of the Yogacharans, or the Chittamachins, mind-only proponents, as I've been translating them up till now. So the Yogacharans, we're talking here, the Yogacharan is referring to this the same school as Chittamachin and mind-only. They're synonyms for the same thing. So the Yogacharans have an even deeper realization, understanding that there are no substantial causes or results existing as an apprehending self. So the listeners and the solitary realizers, they believe that cause and result, causation, is something truly established, that there is some substantial property, a substantial existence to karmic cause and effect, some kind of truly existent self within causation. So from among the listeners and the solitary realizers, the listeners speak of something called substance of no dissipation when it comes to karma, cause and effect. They believe that that karmic cause and effect has some substantial existence, and they describe this as a substance of no dissipation. The solitary realizers, however, their realization of no self goes deeper than the listeners, and they realize that actually karmic cause and effect does not truly exist. It does not substantially exist in this way. So they don't assert this substance of no dissipation. So now let's look at the Yogacharans, or the Chittamachins, the mind-only proponents. Well, their realization goes even deeper than that of the solitary realizers, for they understand that there are no substantial causes or results existing as an apprehending self. So the listeners and solitary realizers, they speak about an inexpressible self. They say that, well, karmic cause and effect does exist on some level. It does have some true existence, but it is inexpressible. You cannot say that causation exists. You also cannot say it doesn't exist, because Buddha taught that causation functions. So we cannot say that it exists. We also cannot say that it does not exist. Causation therefore has this inexpressible nature. However, it's not substantially existent, and so on. So in this way, in brief, they believe that karma has some kind of real nature, and they describe it as an inexpressible self. The Yogacharans, however, their realization being deeper, they realize that actually karma does not have this inexpressible nature. It has no substantial existence. So that's what's meant here when it says they understand that there are no substantial causes or results existing as an apprehending self. The Yogacharans, or the mind-only proponents, they believe that all phenomena are simply the projections of mind. All things are the nature of mind. Everything contained in the three realms of samsara is the nature of mind. So they do not posit a self of any kind. However, the Yogacharans, the mind-only proponents, they do assert the reality of mind. They say that mind is truly established. A self-aware, luminous mind has some true existence. So all phenomena are simply the nature of mind, and mind itself has is truly established. But then we move on to the Madhyamakas, the mind-only proponents, and they realize that even the mind, this self-aware, cognizant mind that the mind-only proponents believe truly exists, they realize that that too actually lacks reality. So in this way we can see that these views are increasingly more profound, right? Increasingly deeper as we move from the lower views to the higher views. We can see how they become progressively deeper. And the Madhyamakas realize that no substantial cause or result exists, even as the nature of reflexive consciousness, thereby completely pacifying all elaborations. So the reflexive consciousness is this self-aware, cognizant mind that the mind-only proponents assert as truly existent. So let's backtrack to the solitary realizers. They assert some kind of inexplicable self. The Yogacharans, however, they realize that this inexpressible self asserted by the solitary realizers actually does not truly exist. But the Yogacharans then say, okay, well, there is some basis for karmic causality. There is some basis for causation. What is that basis? It's reflexive consciousness, or self-aware cognizant mind, or the all-ground. These are all synonyms for the same thing in this context. What do we mean by the all-ground? Well, they say the all-ground is the basic consciousness in which all of our habitual tendencies accumulated in past lives, our karma and habits from past lives, are placed there like seeds, and that is what then manifests or what fuels our future rebirths, the all-ground. And this all-ground is reflexive consciousness, self-aware, cognizant mind. And this mind truly exists. However, so that is the position of the Yogacharans, the Chitta-Machins. However, the Madhyamakas, the middle way proponents, they realize that actually reflexive consciousness itself does not exist. They say, no, that's not established. As it says here, the Madhyamakas realize that no substantial cause or result exists, even as the nature of reflexive consciousness, thereby completely pacifying all elaborations. So the reflexive consciousness posited by the Yogacharans is refuted with logic very extensively, and you can find those different types of logic in treatises like The Root, Stanzas of the Middle Way, Introduction to the Middle Way, and so on. And so the Madhyamakas realize that cause and result, karma, causality, has no substantial existence whatsoever. Cause and result are completely empty. They lack reality. And just as Noble Nagarjuna says, to paraphrase the verse Rinpoche quoted, when you understand emptiness, then you will understand interdependence. So once you understand that all phenomena are emptiness and lack reality, then you will, as a result, understand the amazing manifestation of interdependence, how cause and effect function without fail, even though they lack reality, or precisely because they lack reality. Nothing truly exists, everything is emptiness, and yet cause and effect functions without fail. When you plant a barley seed, without doubt a barley sprout will arise. How amazing, how extraordinary is this, Nagarjuna says. When we analyze and investigate the nature of things, we see that nothing truly exists, everything is emptiness, and yet at the level of conventional unexamined experience, cause and effect functions without fail. And so the Madhyamakas refute the Yogacharan's position. They refute this statement, they refute the assertion that reflexive consciousness is the basis for cause and result. What then is the basis for cause and result? Well, it is the pacification of all elaborations, just as described by Nagarjuna with those lines I quoted just a moment ago. So, following the practice of the path just described, there comes the result, which is the solitary realizer's enlightenment, attained either by practice in groups or rhinoceros-like in solitude. So we have covered the view of the solitary realizers, the meditation of the solitary realizers, and now the result that arises from that view and meditation. Well, the result is to attain the enlightenment of solitary realizers, either through practice in groups or in solitude, like a rhinoceros. So there are these two different approaches. There are some solitary realizers who practice in groups, like a flock of parrots, and there are other solitary realizers who practice in solitude, just like a rhinoceros, which is an animal that lives alone. They take themselves off to mountains on their own, keeping no company, and there they attain the enlightenment of solitary realizers. So two different results for the solitary realizers. The result of those who practice in groups, like a flock of parrots, or the result of those who practice in solitude, like a rhinoceros. And in the more detailed text, we also find discussion about the nature of these two types. So some scriptures say that the solitary realizers who practice in groups are of duller faculties, and those who practice in solitude, like rhinoceroses, are of sharper faculties. Then there are some scholars who hold the opposite opinion and say, no, those who practice in groups and who are able to actually live in a group, they are superior, they are of sharper faculties, and those who practice in solitude are of duller, lesser faculties. So there's a debate about that detail, but in any case, the result of the solitary realizer's path is enlightenment as a solitary realizer, either through practicing in a group or through practicing in solitude. So now we move on to the third of the three vehicles within the vehicle of characteristics, the Bodhisattva vehicle. So the Bodhisattva vehicle takes its name from its cause. Its result is no different from that of the secret mantras. So both the mantra vehicle and the vehicle of the transcendent perfections constitute the same great vehicle. However, they differ in their path, which here is the vehicle of characteristics. So the Bodhisattva vehicle takes its name from its cause. On the Bodhisattva vehicle, one cultivates the cause of the two accumulations, the accumulation of merit and the accumulation of wisdom, and the result of those accumulations is the attainment of perfect enlightenment. And it is understood that the state of perfect enlightenment attained through the vehicle, the secret mantra vehicle of Hatha Yoga, is no different from the perfect enlightenment attained through the Bodhisattva vehicle. As it says here, its result is no different from that of the secret mantras. So both the mantra vehicle and the vehicle of the transcendent perfections constitute the same great vehicle. So this is the position of Longchenpa and Mipham Rinpoche, that the enlightenment attained through the vehicle of the transcendent perfections and the vehicle of mantra is one and the same state of enlightenment. The same state is attained. The way that state is attained differs, yes, according to these two paths. So, in terms of speed and efficacy, but the final state attained is no different. So, as it says, however, they differ in their path, in the speed and efficacy of the path, which here, in this context, is the path of the vehicle of characteristics. So the vehicle of characteristics in which one accumulates must gather the accumulations for 3, 7, and so on countless eons before attaining enlightenment. The view of those engaged in this vehicle is that the whole of the total affliction that is samsara in both cause and result, and of the complete purity that is nirvana in both cause and result, is completely devoid of inherent or true existence on the ultimate level. So I'm speeding up with my explanation now, otherwise we just won't have time to get through the text. So, the view of those engaged in this vehicle, the bodhisattva vehicle, is that the whole of the total affliction that is samsara in both cause and result. So what are the cause and result of samsara? Well, the cause is the afflictions and the result is suffering, right? That comprises samsara. And the complete purity that is nirvana, what is the cause and result of nirvana, enlightenment? Well, it is cessation and the path, right? So the cause is the path, which is comprised of the 37 factors of enlightenment and the realization of the two types of self, which results in the result of perfect enlightenment. So both of these, both the cause and result of samsara and the cause and result of nirvana, are understood to be completely devoid of inherent or true existence on the ultimate level. So ultimately all things are emptiness, ultimately all things are beyond elaboration, beyond construct, beyond concepts, whether it be the accumulations of merit and wisdom that we gather on the path, the result of enlightenment that we attain. All of these things ultimately are empty, they lack reality. So samsara, that to be abandoned, and nirvana, that to be attained, both of these ultimately lack reality. They are equally unreal. They are equally empty. The essence of the ultimate truth is freedom from mental elaboration, and it is called ultimate because it is the object of the ultimate gnosis, or the ultimate primordial wisdom. So this is saying that ultimate truth is beyond the realm, beyond the domain of ordinary mind, conceptual mind. Ultimate truth is freedom from mental elaboration, freedom from conceptual mind, and it's called ultimate because it's the object or domain. It is realized by ultimate gnosis, primordial wisdom, and not conceptual mind. Or because it's the highest of all attainments. So this is another reason why ultimate truth is called ultimate. It is so called because it is the highest of all attainments, of all possible realizations within the realm of samsara, or within the entire world. The highest of all possible attainments is the realization of the ultimate. The ultimate truth can be divided into two kinds: the nominal ultimate truth, in which conceptual elaborations have been partially annulled, and the ultimate truth in itself, where all conceptual elaborations have been completely pacified. So the nominal ultimate truth is a conceptual, it's a limited type of ultimate truth, limited level of ultimate truth, in which conceptual elaborations have only been partially annulled or partially removed, namely a state in which only the conceptual elaborations of true existence have been removed. In contrast, the ultimate truth itself, the non-nominal ultimate truth, is the state in which all conceptual elaborations, so elaborations or concepts of existence, of non-existence, of both and neither, or we could say these four extremes, or we could say the 8 extremes, all elaborations and conceptual constructs have been completely pacified in ultimate truth itself. So in short, when we speak of ultimate truth, we can speak of these two types of ultimate truth: nominal ultimate truth, which is a limited ultimate truth, and the ultimate truth in itself. The relative, literally all-covering truth is deluded consciousness together with appearances. It's so called because the true condition of things is covered, that is veiled and conceptualized by obscurations or by adventitious deluded thoughts. So the relative The relative truth is deluded consciousness together with appearances. So nothing truly exists. Ultimately, nothing truly exists. And yet, unreal, mere appearances arise. Appearances that lack reality, and yet nevertheless appear. These are called mere appearances. There is no contradiction between the fact that ultimately things don't exist and the fact that relatively appearances arise and function. These things are not contradictory. The fact that, relatively speaking, a cup can still perform its function of holding water, that, relatively speaking, a pillar can still perform its function of holding up the beams and supporting a roof. The ability of mere appearances to function and their ultimate lack of reality, their lack of reality, full stop, are not in contradiction in any way. Excuse me, I jumped ahead a bit, so going back a few sentences. So to go over this sentence once more, the relative, literally all-covering truth refers to deluded consciousness together with appearances. So deluded consciousness is that which covers or conceals reality. It's so called because the true condition of things is covered or concealed, that is veiled and conceptualized by obscurations or by adventitious deluded thoughts. So this is the nature of the relative. The relative is subdivided into correct relative truth and mistaken relative truth. So the correct relative truth is, for example, someone who has healthy eyes, whose eyes are not afflicted by jaundice, and they see a white conch as white. That perception of a white conch as white is an example of correct relative truth. But someone with jaundice will then look at that white conch and see it as yellow, not as white, but as yellow. That's mistaken relative truth. There's a lot more to say about this division of relative truth into correct and mistaken, but we won't go into any more details. In short, that is what's meant by correct relative truth and mistaken relative truth. As far as this relative truth is concerned, phenomena which lack true existence appear in the manner of mere illusions. So things appear, things occur, yes, but they do not, they lack reality. Things appear and occur, but they do not truly exist. They do not inherently exist in any way whatsoever. Everything that appears, everything that is apprehended and perceived, all of these things are illusory, they are unreal. When we perceive them as real, well, that's our delusion, that's our mistake. In reality, these appearances are completely unreal. They are phantom-like, they are mere illusions. That's what's meant when it says, as it does here, phenomena lack true existence. They appear in the manner of mere illusions. There is nothing that truly exists. Here, the word mere excludes them from being established as real. So the word mere here, it excludes true establishment. It indicates that all appearances, all things lack reality, that they are mere illusions, that they are unreal. On the level of mere appearance, things have the ability to fulfill their respective functions, and it would be wrong to deny them, saying that they do not exist. So this is what we said a few minutes ago. On the level of mere appearance, of the conventional experience of mere appearances, things have the ability to fulfill their functions, like a cup can hold water, a pillar can support the beams of a roof, and so on. There is no contradiction between the lack of reality, the illusory nature and lack of reality of all things, and their ability to perform a function. They are objects of pure and impure experience and have individual, distinct characteristics, for they exist on the level of conventional evaluative methods of valid cognition. Provisionally, things are thus ascertained in terms of the two kinds of valid cognition. So, the two types of valid cognition are conventional valid cognition and ultimate valid cognition. Ultimate valid cognition examines the ultimate status of things and sees all phenomena to ultimately be empty, and conventional valid cognition analyzes phenomena on the conventional level. So the perception of a white conscious white is a valid conventional cognition, and the perception of a white conscious yellow is an invalid conventional cognition. So thus, things ascertained in terms of these two types of valid cognition. On the ultimate level, they're correctly established as the great sameness free of elaboration, the union of appearance and emptiness, the inseparability of the two truths. All phenomena, whether it be a pillar or anything else, all things without exception are the natural unity of appearance and emptiness. A pillar, for example, appears, and while appearing, it is empty. It is empty, and yet it appears as a pillar. So this is the ultimate nature of things, the natural unity of appearance and emptiness, the inseparability of these two truths. Great is the state of great equality beyond all conceptual elaboration. This needs to be understood, it needs to be resolved and ascertained, and once this has been ascertained, there follows the path of meditation. So we need to ascertain that all things, at the level of appearance, they can perform their respective functions, but ultimately they lack reality, ultimately they don't exist, and these two aspects of appearance and emptiness are not a contradiction. They are in fact a natural unity. Ascertaining this and practicing on the path of meditation accordingly, this is the highest, the most superior path that we find among the various paths in the vehicle of characteristics. And it is the supreme, the most perfect of all insights, of all wisdoms. And this is why it is described as a perfection, the perfection of wisdom, prajnaparamita. Perfection or prajnaparamita perfection or paramita in Sanskrit refers to perfection in the sense of transcending the three realms of samsara, to go beyond the three realms of samsara. This is indicated by the 10 transcendent perfections, referring to the 10 virtuous practices of generosity and the rest, all imbued with wisdom. And of all the various kinds of wisdom or prajna, insight, the supreme and most perfect is non-dual gnosis, non-dual primordial wisdom. The perfection of wisdom, prajnaparamita. Once, from among all the 10 paramitas of generosity and so on, the most important and crucial is prajnaparamita, the perfection of wisdom. Once we attain the state of prajnaparamita, then we will attain the state of perfect enlightenment, the perfect realization of the two types of no-self. The expression transcendent perfections or paramita is used for these 10 virtuous practices, from generosity up to wisdom, and then we have the 7th to 10th paramitas, skillful means, power, aspiration, and primordial wisdom. And this expression is used to describe these 10 virtuous practices because they go beyond, in the sense that they attain to what we call the ultimate reality free of elaboration, which is not an object of the intellect, but transcends it. And also because they go to the other side of the ocean of samsara. There are thus two ways to apply this expression on the path. There's a lot we could say about the term transcendent perfections, paramitas. In short, we should understand that there are two types of transcendent perfection, or paramita, the causal transcendent perfections and the resultant transcendent perfections. So the practices of generosity, discipline, and so on, these are all causal transcendent perfections. The resultant transcendent perfection is the perfection of wisdom itself. So that is essentially that is the perfection that we need to attain, that we need to actualize. So thus there are two ways to apply this expression, the transcendent perfections on the path. Practicing in this way, meaning practicing the 6 transcendent perfections as described, bodhisattvas proceed in stages through the 10 levels or the 10 bhumis, which are the intermediate results of this practice. So by training in the transcendent perfections, the bodhisattvas gather the accumulations, and the path of the bodhisattvas, and indeed the path of all those on the vehicle of characteristics, the listeners, including the listeners and solitary realizers, they must train on the path for a very long time. This is a very lengthy path. So when it comes to the bodhisattvas must gather the accumulations for either 3 countless eons, 7 countless eons, or 33 countless eons before attaining the fruition of perfect enlightenment. So those of sharpest faculties will take 3 countless eons, those of middling 7 faculties, 7 countless eons, and those of lower faculties or duller faculties will take 33 countless eons. So this is a very long path. So in this way, gathering the accumulations for over the course of countless eons, the bodhisattvas proceed in stages through the 10 levels, the 10 bhumis of perfect joy, stainless, and so on. These are the intermediate results of their practice, and finally they arrive at the final consummate result, which is the accomplishment of unsurpassable enlightenment, perfect Buddhahood, characterized by the completion of all the host of qualities, such as those of strength and fearlessness, which are superior to those of the listeners and solitary realizers. So the perfect enlightenment attained by the bodhisattvas is superior to the state of enlightenment attained by the listeners and solitary realizers. The enlightenment attained by the listeners and solitary realizers is described as partial enlightenment. It's not perfect enlightenment, but partial enlightenment. After all, these solitary realizers and listeners are pursuing enlightenment merely for their own benefit alone. So, in contrast to their partial enlightenment, the bodhisattvas attain a state of unsurpassable perfect enlightenment, which transcends the 2 extremes of psychic existence and nirvana, or peace. And with that, they are then able to establish all other beings, lead all other beings to the level of enlightenment. Not only that, they gain the ability to act for the benefit of beings in inconceivable ways. Their ability to benefit others is as vast as space. When they attain the state of perfect enlightenment, they attain all of the qualities that go with it, namely the 10 strengths, the 4 fearlessnesses, the 18 unmixed qualities, and so on and so forth. Sets of extraordinary enlightened qualities through which they can benefit beings. So the enlightenment that the bodhisattvas attain is a state of perfect, complete enlightenment. It is the perfection of, we can say it's consummate, final perfection, ripening, and purification. There is no state of enlightenment superior to this. So with this, we have covered the presentation of the vehicle of listeners, solitary realizers, and bodhisattvas, which pertain to the vehicle of characteristics. Now we will move on to the presentation of the mantra vehicle. So with the presentation of the mantra vehicle, the vehicle of secret mantra, or we could say Vajrayana, we reach the very heart and the main heart and crux of the text. So in the vehicle of characteristics, which we have just covered, then things are explained as being emptiness, right? The ultimate nature of things, reality, is said to be emptiness. That is the focus in the presentation. When we come to the mantra vehicle, then we see that reality is described as boundless purity, as infinite purity, or the inseparability of great purity and equality. So from one perspective, one angle, and one style of presentation, then we can say that the emptiness, the state of emptiness beyond elaboration, as taught in the sutra vehicles, is identical with the emptiness beyond elaboration taught in the tantra vehicles. Yes, from one perspective that is indeed true. We are talking about the same emptiness beyond elaboration in both contexts. However, there are differences between these two. So there we can say it's same but different. And these distinctions and so on are explained in a lot of detail, established and ascertained by Mipham Rinpoche using logic and so on, in a lot of detail, but we won't go into that detail here. We neither have the time nor is it really the place for that. In short, we can say that in the vehicle of characteristics, from the vehicle of the listeners up to the vehicle of the bodhisattvas, things are explained in terms of emptiness beyond elaboration. When we reach the mantra vehicle, then on top of emptiness beyond elaboration, we also find an explanation of relative great purity. So in the mantra vehicle, of course, it's understood and accepted that all things lack reality, all things are emptiness beyond elaboration. That goes without saying, but in addition to being emptiness beyond elaboration, it's explained that all phenomena are right now originally pure. This is the great purity of the relative. So our body, our present physical body can be established as the nature of the deity. Our speech can be established as the nature of enlightened speech, our mind as enlightened mind, and so on. And it is possible to attain enlightenment right here with, or we could say within, these very current illusory phenomena, whose nature is originally pure. So this aspect of purity is taught in the mantra vehicle. The way that it is taught, the way it is established and understood, of course, differs. So there are degrees of purity explained, different degrees of purity explained in the various classes and levels of Tantra. So we will see differences between the presentation of the Kriya Tantra, Upa Tantra, Yoga Tantra, Maha, Anu, and Ati, and so on. And then we reach the point where we talk about boundless purity, infinite purity. So we will see slight differences and degrees in terms of this explanation of great purity as we move through the various vehicles of mantra from Kriya up to Ati. And we should understand, keep in mind that when we talk of boundless purity, this boundless purity is inseparable from emptiness, inseparable from the empty nature of all things. So purity, boundless purity, is nothing separate from or different from emptiness. It is not different or separate from emptiness. This is a very important point to keep at the forefront of your minds. Otherwise, if you don't keep this crucial point in mind, that purity is nothing other than emptiness, it's not something different from emptiness, then you won't be able to connect all of the different vehicles and levels of explanation that we cover in the text. So to sum up and reiterate, just as we saw in the vehicle of characteristics, there were degrees of realization of emptiness. So when we went through the vehicles of listeners, solitary realizers, and bodhisattvas, we saw that they realize emptiness to different degrees, different levels of profundity, right? So too with the various vehicles of mantra. So we have the vehicles of Kriya, Upa Yoga, Maha, Anu, and Ati. And as we look at these vehicles one by one, we will see that they all understand and realize boundless purity to different degrees, right? So we will see increasing degrees of realization as we move from Kriya up to Ati. So that's one thing. We also need to understand that, as I said, emptiness and boundless purity are not separate things. They are not separate things. When we speak about purity in the tantric context, we are speaking about purity on the basis of emptiness, having accepted and ascertained emptiness. So again, purity and emptiness are not separate things. The importance of this cannot be stressed enough. It's really important to understand this right now at the outset. Otherwise, if you fail to understand this crucial point, then you will misunderstand everything that follows, and then we will have wasted our time here. Okay, the diamond vehicle is also divided into three. So diamond vehicle is more commonly translated just into Sanskrit as Vajrayana. We could also say the Vajra vehicle. In any case, this is divided into three as follows: Kriya Tantra, Ubaya Tantra, and Yoga Tantra. So the first, Kriya Tantra, in which it is held that, although inner concentration is certainly the principal cause, accomplishment is not attained without depending on outer activities such as cleanliness and ascetic practices. So concentration, or samadhi, basically refers to an undistracted mind, a one-pointed state free of distraction. Samadhi or concentration, although it's understood that inner concentration is certainly the principal cause. So, although it's understood that concentration, or namely meditating on the deity, is the main point, the principal cause, nevertheless, it is believed that certain skillful means and aspects of ritual cleanliness are necessary. Accomplishment or the siddhis will not be attained without depending upon outer activities or conduct, aspects of conduct such as ritual cleanliness, washing several times throughout the day, and ascetic practices like wearing clean white clothes, relying on a diet of the 3 whites and 3 sweets, and so on. Then we have Ubaya Tantra, which is sometimes called dual Tantra. This level of Tantra holds that accomplishment, meaning the siddhis, the state of enlightenment, is attained by means of both outer activities, outer conduct like ritual cleanliness, and ascetic practices of wearing white clothing, following a diet of the white, 3 whites and 3 sweets, and so on, and inner concentration. So accomplishment is attained by means of both outer conduct and inner concentration, meaning meditating on the deity, one of the deities of the 3 Buddha families. So this could be Avalokiteshvara, Vajrapani, Manjushri, and so on. Yoga Tantra, which holds that even without depending on outer activities, accomplishment is attained by concentration alone. So then we have Yoga Tantra, which is the highest of the 3 outer tantras. At the level of Yoga Tantra, it is held that one can attain accomplishment or enlightenment without depending on outer activities, without depending on the ritual cleanliness, bathing, and so on, and specific types of clothing like white clothes, specific types of diet like a diet of the 3 whites and 3 sweets. Rather, it's held that accomplishment can be attained through meditation, through concentration alone. And here, so when we say accomplishment in this context, we mean the attainment of siddhi, namely the attainment of enlightenment. The level of enlightenment attained through the outer tantras is the same as attained through other vehicles. The result of enlightenment that's attained is the same, but the path through which it's attained differs, right? The speed of the path, the length of the path, and so on. The difficulty of the path. The differences lie in the path, but the ultimate fruition attained by these various paths is one and the same. So with this, we've completed the brief introduction. Now we'll move on to the detailed explanation. And here we have a detailed explanation of Kriya Tantra, then Ubaya Tantra, then Yoga Tantra. So first, the presentation of Kriya Tantra. The view of those who have engaged in the vehicle of Kriya Tantra is as follows. On the ultimate level, they meditate on the fact that all phenomena are devoid of any intrinsic nature that arises and ceases. So ultimately, they familiarize themselves with the fact that all things are devoid of any intrinsic nature. Things neither arise nor cease, they are emptiness beyond elaboration. So the same view, the same understanding as the Madhyamakas of the vehicle of characteristics. From the one hand, we can say that this is an identical understanding with the Madhyamaka proponents of the vehicle of characteristics. From another angle, we could say that there is a difference here in the understanding of emptiness, that the emptiness understood in the mantric vehicles is an emptiness distinguished by the presence of bliss. This is discussed by Mipham Rinpoche in his Nyuksim Korsum, his trilogy on innate mind. But there's a lot of debate about this. There are others who state that no emptiness, the emptiness realized in the level of Sutra and Tantra is identical, doesn't differ in any way, and there's different positions as held by Sakya Pandita and so on and so forth. But this isn't the time to get into such details and debate. So on the ultimate level, they meditate on the fact that all things lack reality, all things are emptiness, while on the relative level, they meditate on the form of a deity. So on the relative level, meaning with regards to experience on a conventional level, their experience of form, sound, smell, taste, touch, and so on. Well, how do we experience things at present? We experience things as impure, right? So we see form as ugly, as unpleasant, as unclean, sound and sensations often as painful and unpleasant. But at this level of practice, all things that appear in conventional experience, form, sensations, and so on, visual forms, sounds, smells, they are all meditated on as the form body of the deity, as pure, basically, as manifestations of purity. So unlike practitioners of the vehicle of characteristics who view the body as impermanent and unclean in nature, here the body is seen as the nature of the deity. Those who meditate in this way and who possess the bodhicitta, as well as the three principles, are explained as being suitable vessels for accomplishment. So when we say bodhicitta here, we are referring to the motivation of bodhicitta, the wish to establish all mother beings at the level of enlightenment. Yes, it does refer to that, but it also refers to rigpa, to natural awareness, to, we could say, Rangjung Yeshe, self-arisen wisdom, to Buddha nature, Sugata Garbha. So it also holds this meaning, the word bodhicitta. So those who meditate in this way, who possess bodhicitta, as well as the three principles, these three principles will be explained below. Such practitioners are said to be suitable vessels for accomplishment, or we could say having these qualities is the cause for accomplishment. What is meant by principle here when it says the three principles? Well, principle means reality or nature, natural state. That's what we mean by principle here. So how many principles or how many natural states, maybe we could say aspects of reality, are there here? Well, there are three. First of all, the principle or the reality of one's own nature, so one's own aggregates and elements and so on, the things that make up oneself, one's being. Then we have the principle of the deity, right, the nature of the deity themselves, and then the principle or the nature of recitation, so the mantra of the deity we are practicing. If it's Manjushri, then Om Arapasana Di. If it's Tara, then Om Tare Tutare Turisoha, and so on and so forth. So we have these three principles or three realities. These three include respectively the nature of the phenomena of samsara, the attributes of nirvana, and the attributes of the means for accomplishing the latter. So these three principles include respectively the nature of the phenomena of samsara. So the first of the three principles, the principle of one's own nature, one's own aggregates, elements, sense fields, and so on, these are the nature of samsara, right? Then we have the attributes of nirvana. Well, this relates to the principle of the deity. Whether we're practicing Manjushri, Avalokiteshvara, or another deity, this deity is the embodiment of nirvana, the state of enlightenment, endowed with the major and minor marks. So the attributes of nirvana are included in the principle of the deity, and then we have the attributes of the means for accomplishing the latter. So the principle of this relates to the third of the three principles, the principle of recitation. So reciting mantra, visualizing the deity, and practicing in this way is the means for accomplishing the latter, for accomplishing the deity, which is nirvana, right? So these are the three principles. The principle of one's own nature concerns the self, which is simply the five aggregates taken as a single object, unexamined by the intellect. The nature of that self, according to the listeners, is empty and being devoid of conceptual structures such as self and mindness, eternalism and nihilism, as propounded by the extremists. The listeners do not, however, go as far as saying that phenomena, like the aggregates, do not exist at all. So the meaning of this we've already covered in the previous sections, where we discussed how in the vehicle of characteristics it's understood that the aggregates are free of self, they lack self, they are emptiness, and in this way one goes beyond the mistaken beliefs of the non-Buddhists who hold eternalistic and nihilistic views. So this is to say that in the vehicle of mantra, one goes a step further even than the view of the vehicle of characteristics by recognizing that the body itself is the nature of the deity. And this is a unique feature of the mantra vehicle. So the listeners do not, however, go as far as saying that phenomena like the aggregates do not exist at all. So then the commentary continues, for the Yogacharans, meaning the Chitta Mantrans, the mind-only proponents, it is empty and being devoid of the conceptual structures of the listeners' concepts of subject and object, but they do not go as far as saying that reflexive awareness, the mind and mental events, does not exist at all. And for the Madhyamakas, it is empty and being devoid of the Chitta Mantrans' concepts of the non-conceptual wisdom existing ultimately. For them, the nature of the self is a state of complete pacification of all conceptual attributes. And so the main point here is that the practitioners of the mantra vehicle go even further than the practitioners of the vehicle of characteristics. Not only do they understand the self, the aggregates, to be empty, but they view the aggregates, the body, which in the vehicle of characteristics is viewed as something unclean, something unpleasant, and impermanent in nature. They view that same body as actually being pure and the nature of the deity. So, the principle of the deity comprises 6 elements of the secret mantra: emptiness, sound, and so on, which are known as the 6 deities. So these are the 6 deities taught in Kriya Yoga, the 6 deities of Kriya, which are the deity as emptiness, the deity as letter, the deity as sound, the deity as form, the deity as mudra, and deity as symbol. So we've just listed them there, and a little bit will be said about each of them. Now, so the principle of one's own nature is like a golden plate, covered with, as it were, the principle of the deity, which is like refined quicksilver, or we could say mercury. So say you have a golden plate, a plate of pure gold, and you cover the surface of that plate with refined quicksilver. Then, if you then draw or perhaps engrave or sculpt deities or any image on that quicksilver, that base of gold, and then a layer of quicksilver, the image will come up really well, really clearly and well. So, just like that, the principle of one's nature is like such a golden plate covered with refined quicksilver. This refined quicksilver is like the principle of the deity. On this it is held, one repeatedly meditates, so one repeatedly meditates on the deity in this way. The principle of recitation has 3 essential states, 3 great images, 3 objects of concentration, and 4 branches. So all of these aspects of recitation, and indeed all of these 6 deities, will be explained, at least briefly, in the following text, the following section of text. The 3 essential states are gnosis, name, and form. So when we practice the deity, or we meditate upon the deity, we do that by generating their enlightened form, their enlightened speech, and their enlightened mind, meditating on their enlightened body, speech, and mind. Gnosis here means primordial wisdom, the wisdom, and is referring to the wisdom deity. Name refers to the name of the deity, whether it be Vajrasattva, Avalokiteshvara, Manjushri, or another deity. And a form refers to the form, the appearance, or the deity's body, the form of the deity, the deity's body. So this is what's meant by gnosis, name, and form here. So gnosis refers to the primordial wisdom of the enlightened state. Name is the deity's name, and form is the deity's form. Having realized that, on the ultimate level, the pure nature of the deity and one's own impure nature are not 2 separate entities, one meditates accordingly. So, just a moment ago we spoke about the principle of self and the principle of the deity, right? So one realizes that ultimately the principle of self, oneself, one's own nature, is inseparable from the nature of the deity. Ultimately, the principle of self and the principle of the deity are not 2 separate things. They are identical. They are indivisible. So one's own body, one's own being, that in previous contexts was regarded as impure, impermanent, unclean, and so on, at this level is understood to be essentially identical with the nature of the deity. So one realizes that the seemingly impure, unclean body of oneself and the pure body of the deity, the pure nature of the deity, Avalokiteshvara, or whichever deity one is meditating on, these are not 2 separate entities. They are indistinguishable. So realizing this, realizing that ultimately these 2 are one and the same, indistinguishable, one meditates accordingly. As confused sentient beings, we regard our body as unclean and impure and separate from the pure body of the deity, but ultimately there is no such distinction. Ultimately they are one and the same. So I'll use Avalokiteshvara as the example of the deity here, since the most Chinese practitioners feel a strong connection with Avalokiteshvara, and likewise Amitabha, so we'll stick with Avalokiteshvara as an example. So, One thus comes to know that pure self-cognizing awareness, which is the gnosis of the deity, and impure awareness, which is the knowledge of oneself, are not two separate entities, and likewise that there is no difference either between the deity's body and speech, which appear superior, and one's own body and speech, which appear ordinary. So in this way, knowing that ultimately the pure nature of the deity and one's own impure nature are not actually separate, but are one and the same, one thus comes to know that pure self-cognizing awareness, which is the gnosis of the deity. So the wisdom, the primordial wisdom, the enlightened mind of the deity. And impure awareness, on the other hand, which is one's own awareness, one's own, as a sentient being, one's confused, dualistic, afflicted state of mind. These two are likewise not two separate entities. Likewise, one comes to understand that there is no difference between the deity's enlightened body and their enlightened speech, which is the nature of mantras, syllables, the Mani mantra, and so on, which appear superior, and one's own body and speech, which appear ordinary and inferior and impure. One comes to understand that there's actually no difference, in short, between the body, speech, and mind of oneself and that of the deity. And on that basis, even on the relative level, one is transformed into and generated as the deity. So this is a hallmark of the tantric path, to perceive one's own, to train in perceiving one's own body as the body of the deity. So one does this with the understanding, with the knowledge that essentially my own body, speech, and mind are no different from the deity's enlightened body, speech, and mind. With that knowledge, understanding the reasons behind deity visualization, then even on the relative level, one is transformed into and generated as the deity. One visualizes oneself, one perceives oneself, one's body as the deity. And by training in this way, one accomplishes the deity, which is the essence of the result, the purification of delusion. So by training in this way, one comes to attain the fruition of enlightenment. To accomplish the deity is to accomplish enlightenment. If you accomplish the deity, say Avalokiteshvara, well then you have attained enlightenment, right? Okay, we'll pause here for a short break and then we'll come back and resume.